Standing in my torn wedding dress outside the country club, mascara streaming down my cheeks, I never imagined this moment would become the catalyst for the most satisfying revenge story of my life. My stepmother Delilah had just humiliated me in front of 200 guests, calling me a gold-digging street sweeper who did not deserve to wear white. Little did she know my quiet husband Marcus was not just any man. He was the billionaire owner of the very empire that controlled her precious social standing. Hey everyone! Before we dive into this wild family drama, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. If you love stories about karma, coming full circle, and justice being served, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this family revenge tale will leave you absolutely speechless. Trust me, you will want to see how this all unfolds. 6 months earlier, I was Serafina Blake, a 26-year-old librarian living in a modest apartment in downtown Portland. My life was quiet, predictable, and exactly how I liked it. I had grown up in foster care after my mother died when I was 12, bouncing between homes until I aged out of the system. Books became my refuge stories, my escape, and the library my sanctuary. Everything changed the day Marcus walked into my library. He was different from the usual patrons. Tall, with kind brown eyes and an understated presence that somehow commanded attention without demanding it. He wore simple clothes, drove an old Honda, and spoke softly. When he asked for help finding research materials about sustainable agriculture, I was intrigued. Most people came looking for romance novels or the latest bestsellers. Over the following weeks, Marcus became a regular visitor. We would talk for hours about books, dreams, and life philosophies. He told me he worked in business consulting, traveled frequently, but was looking to settle down. I shared my love for literature and my dream of maybe opening a small bookshop someday. There was something refreshingly genuine about him in a world that often felt superficial. When he asked me to dinner after 2 months of these conversations, I said yes, without hesitation. Our relationship blossomed naturally. Marcus was attentive, thoughtful, and incredibly down-to-earth. He brought me flowers from street vendors, took me to hole-in-the-wall restaurants, and listened when I talked about the loneliness of growing up without family. He never mentioned wealth-fancy cars or expensive vacations. I assumed he lived modestly like me. The proposal came during a quiet evening in my apartment. No grand gestures, no expensive ring initially, just Marcus on one knee asking if I wanted to build a life together. The ring was simple, elegant, and perfect. I said yes because I loved this kind, humble man who made me feel less alone in the world. Planning our wedding was where things became complicated. Marcus insisted on certain vendors, specific venues, and guest lists that seemed beyond our budget. When I questioned the expense, he assured me he had been saving and wanted our day to be special. I trusted him completely, never suspecting the truth about his identity. My stepmother Delilah entered the picture when I reached out to my father 3 weeks before the wedding. We had been estranged since he remarried when I was 16. Delilah had made it clear I was not welcome in their new family dynamic. She tolerated my presence at holidays, but never missed an opportunity to remind me that I was an outsider, a burden from my father's past. When I called to invite them to the wedding, Delilah answered the phone. Her voice dripped with false sweetness as she congratulated me on finally finding someone willing to marry me. She made passive-aggressive comments about hoping my groom knew what he was getting into, marrying someone with no family connections or social standing. Despite her hostility, I wanted my father there. He was the only family I had left, even if his wife despised me. Delilah agreed they would attend, but I could hear the judgment in her voice. She asked pointed questions about Marcus, his family, his profession, clearly fishing for information she could use against me later. The week before the wedding, Delilah called with an unexpected offer. She wanted to host the rehearsal dinner at their country club, claiming it was her gift to us. I was suspicious, but hopeful. Maybe she was finally ready to accept me into the family. Marcus seemed pleased when I told him, saying it would be nice for my father to feel involved. What I did not know was that Delilah had been conducting her own investigation into Marcus. She hired a private investigator, convinced that any man willing to marry me must be hiding something terrible. She was determined to expose him as a fraud, or worse, during the rehearsal dinner. The irony was delicious in retrospect. While she was digging for dirt on my husband, she had no idea she was investigating Marcus Wellington, the reclusive billionaire who owned Wellington Industries. His company controlled the supply chains for most of the luxury goods her social circle obsessed over. The hotels where she vacationed, the designer brands she flaunted, the investment portfolios that funded her lifestyle, all traced back to companies under Marcus's umbrella. Marcus had built his fortune by staying out of the spotlight. He avoided social media, rarely appeared in business magazines, and conducted his affairs through intermediaries. His wealth was vast, but invisible, exactly how he preferred it. He had grown up watching his father's public profile make their family targets for exploitation and manipulation. When he took over the company, Marcus decided to operate differently. The rehearsal dinner arrived with Portland's typical autumn rain. I wore a simple blue dress I had bought on sale, carefully budgeting every detail of our wedding week. Delilah greeted us at the country club entrance, her eyes immediately scanning Marcus from head to toe. Her expression was predatory, like a hawk circling prey. Throughout dinner, she made increasingly bold comments about our financial situation. She questioned how we were affording the wedding, suggested Marcus must be taking on significant debt, and wondered aloud if I understood what I was marrying into. Her friends joined the conversation, making thinly veiled remarks about gold diggers and social climbers. Marcus remained calm throughout her assault, occasionally squeezing my hand under the table. I was mortified, but tried to maintain composure. This was exactly the kind of behavior that had driven me away from my family years earlier. The breaking point came when Delilah stood to make a toast. Her voice carried across the dining room as she welcomed everyone to celebrate my upcoming marriage. But instead of offering congratulations, she launched into a speech about the importance of marrying within one's social class, the dangers of deceptive relationships, and the value of knowing someone's true background. Her words cut deep, but worse was the murmur of agreement from other guests. These people who had never met me were nodding along as she essentially called me a fortune hunter. I felt 16 again, standing in her kitchen while she explained why I could not join their family vacation because there was not enough room. As we left the club that night, Marcus was unusually quiet. When I apologized for Delilah's behavior, he simply kissed my forehead and said everything would work out. I had no idea he was already planning how to handle my stepmother's cruelty. The wedding day dawned gray and drizzling, matching my anxious mood perfectly. The morning of our wedding, I woke up in my small apartment feeling a mixture of excitement and dread. The rehearsal dinner had left me rattled, but Marcus seemed unusually calm when he called to check on me. There was something different in his voice, a quiet confidence I had never heard before. My maid of honor, Jennifer, arrived early to help me get ready. She had been my closest friend since college, one of the few people who knew my full history with Delilah. As she helped me into my wedding dress, a simple but elegant gown I had found at a sample sale, she tried to reassure me about the previous evening. The dress was perfect for me, classic and understated, but I could practically hear Delilah's voice criticizing its modest price point. Jennifer noticed my nervousness and suggested we practice some breathing exercises we had learned in our yoga class. As we went through our routine, I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. Marcus had insisted on handling all the wedding day logistics himself. He arranged transportation, coordinated with vendors, and even hired a wedding coordinator I never met. When I questioned the expense, he reminded me that this was our one special day, and he wanted everything perfect. His confidence about the arrangements seemed unusual for someone I thought was stretching financially, but I trusted him completely. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock at a beautiful garden venue outside the city. Marcus had fallen in love with the location during our first visit, and I understood why. The gardens were stunning, even in autumn, with mature trees creating a natural cathedral. The owner had given us an excellent rate, Marcus explained, because they wanted to support young couples starting their lives together. What I did not realize was that Marcus owned the venue. He had purchased it years earlier as part of a larger real estate portfolio but kept the original management team in place. They had been instructed to treat us like any other couple, maintaining the illusion of his modest means. As Jennifer and I finished getting ready, my father arrived to escort me to the ceremony. He looked uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo, clearly nervous about the day ahead. We had barely spoken since the rehearsal dinner, but he seemed genuinely happy to see me in my wedding dress. For a moment, it felt like we might recapture some of the closeness we had shared before Delilah entered our lives. During the drive to the venue, my father awkwardly attempted to apologize for his wife's behavior. He explained that Delilah was protective of their family reputation and sometimes came across more harshly than she intended. I appreciated his effort, but we both knew her cruelty was intentional. Still, I was grateful he was there to walk me down the aisle. The ceremony itself was magical. Marcus looked handsome waiting for me at the altar, his warm smile washing away all my morning anxieties. As we exchanged vows, I felt the rightness of our decision. This man had brought joy and stability into my life, and I was eager to start our future together. His vows were heartfelt and personal, referencing specific moments from our courtship that showed how carefully he had been paying attention. Jennifer later told me she noticed several guests she did not recognize, well-dressed people who seemed to know Marcus but kept their distance. At the time, I assumed they were colleagues from his consulting work. The wedding photographer, who Marcus had insisted on hiring despite the cost, captured every moment beautifully. The flowers were more elaborate than I expected, and the reception venue was decorated with an elegance that seemed beyond our budget. But the happiness of the ceremony could not completely shield me from what was coming. During cocktail hour, I noticed Delilah holding court with a group of her friends near the bar. She was speaking in hushed, urgent tones, occasionally glancing in my direction. Something about her body language suggested she was planning something, but I tried to focus on greeting our guests and enjoying the celebration. Marcus was mingling effortlessly with everyone from my college friends to his mysterious colleagues. He had a way of making each person feel heard and valued in conversation. Several guests commented to me about how grounded and genuine my new husband seemed. One of his colleagues mentioned how refreshing it was to see Marcus so happy and relaxed. The reception dinner went smoothly until Delilah requested the microphone for her toast. The moment she stood up, I felt my stomach tighten. There was something predatory in her expression, a look of barely contained excitement that terrified me. Marcus reached over and took my hand, his touch reassuring, but his expression suddenly serious. Delilah began her speech graciously, thanking everyone for attending and welcoming Marcus to the family. But I could sense she was building towards something. Her voice took on a theatrical quality as she talked about the importance of honesty in marriage and the value of truly knowing your spouse. Then she produced a manila envelope from her purse. With dramatic flair, she announced that she had some interesting information about the groom that she felt compelled to share. The room fell silent as she opened the envelope and began reading from what appeared to be an investigator's report. Her voice was triumphant as she detailed Marcus's employment history, his modest apartment, and his supposedly limited financial prospects. But something was wrong with her narrative. Instead of exposing some terrible secret, she was revealing details that made Marcus sound even more admirable. She read about his charitable donations, his volunteer work, his excellent credit rating. The guests were looking confused rather than shocked. Delilah's confidence began to waver as she continued reading. The report described Marcus as financially responsible, professionally respected, and personally ethical. She had clearly expected to find evidence of deception or failure, but instead had documented his genuine character. Growing desperate, she abandoned the report and launched into a personal attack on me. Her voice rising, she declared that regardless of Marcus's apparent respectability, I was still a nobody from foster care who had manipulated my way into this family. She listed my perceived shortcomings from my modest background to my simple lifestyle, painting me as a gold digger who had somehow fooled everyone. The room was dead silent now. I felt humiliated and exposed exactly as she intended. But then I noticed something unexpected. Marcus was smiling. Not a cruel smile, but the expression of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. He stood slowly, his movement drawing every eye in the room. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but carried an authority I had never heard before. That was when my quiet, modest husband revealed exactly who he really was. Marcus stood at our head table with a composure that seemed to transform him before my eyes. The gentle librarian's husband I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who commanded the room effortlessly. His voice when he spoke carried an authority that made every person present lean forward to listen. "Thank you, Delilah, for that illuminating speech." He began, his tone pleasant, but with an edge that made her confidence visibly falter. "I think it's time everyone understood exactly what kind of family dynamic we're dealing with here." He reached into his jacket and produced his own folder much thicker than Delilah's investigative report. The way he held it suggested he had been prepared for this moment, perhaps even anticipated it. "Since we're sharing background information tonight, let me contribute some facts that might interest everyone." Marcus opened the folder and began reading in the same theatrical tone Delilah had used. Delilah Morrison, married to Robert Blake in 2007. Previously married to Harold Morrison, divorced in 2006 after his bankruptcy resulted in foreclosure of their family home. The color drained from Delilah's face. She had never told anyone about her first marriage's financial collapse, carefully constructing a narrative about being widowed young. My father looked confused, clearly hearing this information for the first time. Prior to marrying Robert, Delilah worked as a cocktail waitress at the Riverside Casino, where she met several wealthy patrons she dated simultaneously while still married to Harold. Interesting approach to financial planning. Marcus's voice remained conversational, but his words hit like precision strikes. Jennifer grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with shock. Around the room, guests were shifting uncomfortably, some pulling out phones to record what was clearly becoming an epic confrontation. Marcus continued reading. Credit history shows multiple defaults, 3 repossessions, and a pattern of opening store credit accounts that were subsequently charged off. Current household income is largely dependent on Robert's salary, while Delilah maintains several secret credit cards she uses for shopping trips she hides from her husband. My father's face went through a series of expressions, confusion giving way to recognition, and then to what looked like betrayal. He was learning about his wife's deceptions, along with everyone else. "But the really interesting part," Marcus said, his voice taking on a tone of genuine curiosity, "is the private investigator you hired to research me. James Patterson, formerly of Patterson Investigations, recently had his license suspended for conducting illegal surveillance and falsifying reports. Did he mention that when you hired him?" Delilah was backing away from the microphone, now her face flushed with humiliation and rage. "How dare you?" she managed to stammer. "I was trying to protect my family from someone who was clearly lying about their background." That was when Marcus smiled, and I finally understood that this entire evening had been orchestrated. My husband was not the victim in this scenario. He was the chess master who had been planning this move for months. "Lying about my background," Marcus repeated thoughtfully. "That's an interesting accusation. Should I clarify a few things for everyone?" He gestured to one of the well-dressed men I had noticed earlier, who approached our table and handed Marcus a business card. Marcus held it up so the room could see the Wellington Industries logo. I'm Marcus Wellington, Chief Executive Officer of Wellington Industries. Some of you might be familiar with our work. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Several guests gasped audibly, phones started buzzing with Google searches, and I heard someone whisper that Wellington Industries was worth billions. The pieces started falling into place in my mind. The expensive wedding vendors Marcus had insisted on, all of whom had given us special rates. The venue owner who had been so accommodating. The photographer who seemed overqualified for what I thought we were paying. Marcus had been using his resources all along, just hiding them from me. Now, Delilah, let's talk about lying. Marcus continued, his attention returning to my stepmother, who looked like she wanted to disappear entirely. Because while you were investigating my supposedly modest background, I was learning some fascinating things about your family's social standing. He pulled out another document. The country club where you hosted our rehearsal dinner, Wellington Industries owns the management company that runs their operations. Your husband Robert's pension fund, managed by our financial services division. The designer handbag collection you're so proud of, those brands are manufactured by companies in our supply chain. The room was completely silent now, except for the sound of rain against the windows. Delilah looked like she was going to be sick. In fact, Marcus said, consulting his papers again, according to our records, your lifestyle is funded almost entirely by systems that trace back to my companies. The investment portfolio that pays for your shopping trips, the cruise line, where you vacation every winter, even the grocery chain, where you shop for organic produce. All connected to Wellington Industries. My father finally found his voice. Delilah, what is he talking about? What investigation? What credit cards? But Delilah was beyond answering questions. Her carefully constructed social persona was crumbling in real time. The woman who had spent years positioning herself as superior to me was being exposed as a fraud in front of everyone whose opinion she valued. Marcus was not finished. The most ironic part is that while you were calling my wife a gold digger, your own financial security depends entirely on the very empire you were trying to discredit. Every luxury you enjoy, every social connection you value exists because of the business I built. Jennifer leaned over and whispered, Holy shit, Sarah. Your husband is an actual billionaire. I was still processing the revelation myself, trying to reconcile this commanding figure with the gentle man who brought me coffee at the library. But here's what really bothers me, Delilah, Marcus said, his voice hardening for the first time. You spent months planning to humiliate my wife on our wedding day. You hired investigators to dig up dirt on me, hoping to destroy her happiness. You stood in front of our friends and family and called her a nobody, a gold digger, someone beneath your social status. He moved closer to where Delilah stood, frozen near the microphone. The woman you tried to humiliate tonight is worth more than every person in this room combined. Not because of money, but because of character. She has faced hardship you cannot imagine and responded with grace. She has built a meaningful life from nothing, while you have spent years manipulating and deceiving people to maintain an illusion. The validation of hearing my worth defended so powerfully was overwhelming. I felt tears starting, but they were different from the humiliation tears Delilah had caused earlier. So, let me make something clear to everyone here, Marcus concluded, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. My wife, Serafina, is not a gold digger who married up. I am the lucky man who convinced an extraordinary woman to build a life with me, and anyone who suggests otherwise is welcome to take their opinions and their social connections and find somewhere else to share them. The applause started slowly, with Jennifer clapping enthusiastically, then spread throughout the room. Even some of Delilah's friends were applauding, perhaps recognizing the poetic justice of the moment. But Delilah was not finished. Humiliated and desperate, she made one final devastating mistake that would seal her fate completely. Looking directly at me with pure hatred, she grabbed the microphone one last time and screamed, I do not care how much money he has. You are still nothing but foster care trash who does not deserve to wear a wedding dress. The room fell silent again, but this time the energy was different, dangerous. That was when Marcus decided to show Delilah exactly what real power looked like. The silence that followed Delilah's venomous outburst was deafening. Every person in that room understood they had just witnessed something unforgivable. Attacking someone's wealth was one thing, but attacking their childhood trauma, their most vulnerable experiences, crossed every line of human decency. Marcus set down his papers with deliberate calm. When he looked at Delilah, his expression had changed completely. The gentle man who brought me flowers was gone. In his place stood someone who had built a business empire, someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of lives. Foster care trash, he repeated slowly as if testing how the words sounded. Those are interesting word choices, Delilah. Let me tell you what foster care actually produces. He gestured toward me, his voice filling with genuine pride. Foster care produced a woman who earned a full scholarship to university, who worked 3 jobs to put herself through graduate school, who spent 5 years volunteering at literacy programs for underprivileged children, who has never asked anyone for anything she had not earned herself. The room was riveted. Several guests were openly crying, moved by this defense of my character. But Marcus was building towards something bigger. But since you seem so concerned with social status and financial backgrounds, let me share some information about your own situation that might interest everyone here. Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call. David? Yes, it's Marcus. I need you to pull the Morrison account immediately. Delilah's face went white. What are you doing? David handles our property management division, Marcus explained to the room conversationally. Delilah, what's your current address? 15 Oak Street, correct? The lovely colonial with the 3-car garage that you post about constantly on social media. My stepmother was backing toward the exit now, clearly recognizing that something terrible was about to happen. That house belongs to Wellington Properties. We purchased the entire development last year as part of a portfolio expansion. Your landlord, Pinnacle Realty, that's one of our subsidiary companies. Marcus was scrolling through his phone as he spoke. David, I need the Morrison lease terminated immediately. 30-day notice, standard procedure. The gasp from my father was audible across the room. Delilah, you told me you inherited that house from your aunt. I did, she protested desperately. I mean, the paperwork is complicated, but... Marcus looked up from his phone with mock sympathy. Oh, there seems to be some confusion. According to our records, Helen Morrison, your supposed aunt, never owned any property. She rented a small apartment until she passed away in 2018. No inheritance, no will, no property transfer. The lies were unraveling faster than Delilah could fabricate new ones. My father's expression was shifting from confusion to anger as he realized the extent of her deceptions. But wait, there's more, Marcus continued, clearly enjoying himself now. Robert, you might be interested to know that your wife has been using your social security number to open credit accounts. The debt she's accumulated in your name totals approximately $87,000. My father sank into a chair, the full scope of his wife's betrayals hitting him all at once. Around the room, Delilah's social circle was pulling back from her, distancing themselves from the scandal that was unfolding. Identity theft is a federal crime, Marcus noted casually. But I'm sure that was just another misunderstanding. Right, Delilah? She was hyperventilating now, her carefully applied makeup running as sweat and tears destroyed her polished appearance. You cannot do this. You cannot destroy someone's life because they hurt your feelings. Marcus laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. Hurt my feelings? Delilah, you attacked my wife's childhood trauma in front of 200 people. You called a woman who survived foster care and built a meaningful life trash because you were embarrassed about being exposed as a fraud. This is not about hurt feelings. This is about consequences. He made another phone call. Sarah Marcus Wellington. I need you to review all Wellington Industries vendor contracts and remove any companies that employ or are owned by Delilah Morrison. Yes, immediately. Turning back to the room, he explained, Sarah runs our procurement department. Several of your friends here, Delilah, have businesses that depend on contracts with our companies. I think they deserve to know that maintaining relationships with you might impact their financial futures. The effect was immediate. Delilah's so-called friends began moving away from her, some literally stepping backward to distance themselves. The social connections she had spent years cultivating were evaporating in real time as people calculated the cost of association. You are destroying innocent people, Delilah accused desperately. I am giving people information they need to make informed decisions, Marcus corrected. Just like you tried to do with your little investigation into my background. The difference is, my information is accurate. Jennifer had moved closer to me, squeezing my hand as we watched this systematic dismantling of my stepmother's life. I should have felt sorry for her, but all I could think about were the years of casual cruelty, the constant reminders that I did not belong the way she had made me feel small and unwanted. Marcus made one final phone call. James, it's Marcus. Remember that conversation we had about the Morrison investigation? I think it's time to file those reports with the state licensing board. He looked directly at Delilah as he spoke. James Patterson, the private investigator you hired. He's been cooperating with our legal team. Turns out, conducting surveillance on a private citizen without proper authorization violates several state laws. He's hoping cooperation will reduce his charges. The room was watching a complete social and financial execution. Delilah had spent years building her status through manipulation and deception, and Marcus was methodically destroying every pillar that supported her constructed life. Please, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry. I did not mean what I'd said about Serafina. Marcus considered this for a moment. You know what, Delilah? I believe you are sorry. You are sorry you got caught. You are sorry you picked the wrong target. You are sorry your lies are being exposed. But you are not sorry for the years of cruelty you inflicted on my wife. You are not sorry for making a young woman feel worthless because she had no family to defend her. He moved closer to her, his voice dropping so only she could hear, but somehow everyone in the room caught his words. You called her foster care trash. Let me tell you what foster care actually creates: survivors, warriors, people who understand that family is not about blood, it's about choice. And I choose Serafina every single day. The applause this time was thunderous, but Marcus raised his hand for silence because he was not finished with Delilah yet. As the applause died down, Delilah stood frozen in the center of the reception hall, like a deer caught in headlights. Her entire world was crumbling around her, but Marcus apparently had more demolition work to do. Since we're all here together, Marcus announced to the room, I think this is the perfect opportunity to share some other interesting discoveries my legal team made during their research. He opened another folder, this one significantly thicker than the others. Delilah's eyes widened as she recognized what appeared to be bank statements and financial documents. Robert, you mentioned earlier that you were confused about some of the information coming to light tonight. I think you deserve to understand exactly what your wife has been doing with your shared finances. Marcus held up several documents. These are bank statements from 3 accounts Delilah opened using your information, but without your authorization. My father looked like he was aging years by the minute. Each revelation was another blow to his understanding of the woman he had married. How much? He asked quietly. The accounts currently show negative balances totaling $134,000. The money was withdrawn through cash advances and wire transfers to accounts in Nevada where Delilah has been funding what appears to be a gambling addiction. The gasps from the crowd were audible, but Delilah's friends were no longer just distancing themselves physically. Several were already on their phones, likely warning their own families about potential exposure to the scandal. "Gambling," my father whispered. "Delilah, you told me you were visiting your sister in Nevada." Marcus consulted his papers again. According to casino records, Delilah has been a regular patron at 3 Las Vegas establishments for the past 2 years. Her total losses exceed $200,000 funded through credit cards, personal loans, and apparently unauthorized access to your retirement accounts. The systematic destruction of Delilah's lies was fascinating to watch. Marcus had clearly spent considerable time preparing for this moment, gathering evidence that painted a complete picture of deception and manipulation. But the gambling debt is not the most interesting part. Marcus continued his tone, suggesting he was saving the best revelation for last. "Delilah, would you like to explain to everyone why you hired a private investigator to research me, or should I share what we discovered about your motivations?" She was shaking now, her composed social facade completely shattered. "I just wanted to protect my family," she managed to stammer. "Protect your family from what exactly?" Marcus pressed. "From my wife's happiness, from her chance at building a life with someone who values her? Or were you protecting yourself from something else entirely?" He pulled out another document. "This is interesting. Delilah, 3 weeks before you hired the investigator to research me, you took out a life insurance policy on Robert. A very substantial policy that would pay out double in the case of accidental death." The room went completely silent. My father's face went white as he stared at his wife, understanding dawning in his expression. "You also made some unusual purchases during that time period. Large amounts of prescription medication that you claimed were for your mother's arthritis, except your mother has been dead for 6 years. Cleaning supplies ordered in bulk. And several consultations with divorce attorneys in 3 different states." Marcus set down the papers and looked directly at Delilah. "Were you planning to kill your husband, or just disappear with his money? Either way, investigating me was part of your exit strategy, was it not? You needed to make sure Serafina was not inheriting anything significant that might complicate your plans." The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Delilah was crying now. Her makeup completely ruined her carefully styled hair, disheveled from running her hands through it nervously. "That is insane," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "You are making wild accusations based on coincidences." Marcus pulled out his phone again. "Detective Morrison? Yes, I know it's late, but I think you need to hear this conversation. Could you send a unit to the Riverside Gardens reception hall? We have some evidence you might find interesting regarding an insurance fraud investigation." The mention of police sent a visible shock through Delilah. She looked around the room, desperately seeking some escape route, but found only faces staring back at her with disgust and horror. "You cannot be serious," she whispered. "You are calling the police to our family gathering." "I am calling the police to report several federal crimes that have come to light this evening," Marcus corrected. "Identity theft, insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and fraud against financial institutions. This stopped being a family gathering when you decided to attack my wife and reveal your criminal activities." My father finally stood up, his face a mixture of betrayal and disgust. "Delilah, is any of this true? Did you really take out insurance policies on me? Have you been stealing money?" She tried to approach him, but he stepped backward. "Robert, honey, I can explain everything. These are all misunderstandings. He is twisting innocent actions to make them look suspicious." "Innocent actions." My father's voice was rising. "Gambling away our retirement savings is innocent. Taking out secret life insurance policies is innocent. Planning to disappear with my money is innocent." The sound of sirens was becoming audible in the distance. Marcus had not been bluffing about calling the police. Several guests were starting to leave, clearly uncomfortable with being present for what was about to become a crime scene. "This is all your fault." Delilah suddenly screamed, pointing directly at me. None of this would have happened if you had just stayed away. You brought this man into our lives. You caused this investigation. The accusation was so absurd that several people actually laughed. Jennifer stood up beside me, her voice clear and strong. Are you seriously blaming Serafina for your own criminal behavior? She did not force you to steal money or plan murder. Marcus moved protectively closer to me. Delilah, you have spent this entire evening trying to destroy my wife's happiness. You called her foster care trash, questioned her worth, and attempted to humiliate her on our wedding day. Now you want to blame her for the consequences of your own choices? The police sirens were getting closer. Through the windows, we could see blue and red lights flashing in the parking lot. Delilah was looking around frantically, probably considering whether she could run. Officers! Marcus called out as two policemen entered the reception hall. Thank you for coming so quickly. I believe we have several crimes to report, and the primary suspect is right here. As the police approached Delilah, she made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation. She fell to her knees, dramatically sobbing loudly about misunderstandings and false accusations. But the evidence Marcus had compiled was overwhelming, and her performance convinced no one. The last thing she said before they handcuffed her was directed at me. This is not over, you little orphan. When I get out, I will destroy you. Even as they led her away, she was still trying to hurt me. But her words bounced off harmlessly because I finally understood something important. I was not alone anymore. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new office at the Wellington Foundation, looking out at the Portland skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The space was beautiful, modern, and welcoming, designed to make the vulnerable families we served feel comfortable rather than intimidated. It was exactly the kind of environment I had dreamed of creating during my years at the library. Marcus had surprised me with the foundation as a wedding gift, but not in the way most people might expect. He had not simply handed me a ready-made organization to run. Instead, he had provided seed funding and asked me to build something meaningful from the ground up. The Wellington Foundation focused on supporting foster children aging out of the system, providing college scholarships, job training, and mentorship programs. Working with these young people had been transformative for both of us. Marcus discovered that his business skills translated beautifully into nonprofit work, while I found that my own experiences gave me unique insight into what these kids actually needed. We were not just funding programs. We were creating the support system I had wished for during my own transition to adulthood. The foundation had become more successful than either of us anticipated. Within 2 months, we had partnership agreements with 3 universities' job placement programs, with local businesses, and a waiting list of mentor families. The local media had picked up our story not because of Marcus's wealth, but because of the genuine impact we were making in young people's lives. Jennifer had joined our board of directors, bringing her background in social work to help us navigate the complex systems these kids faced. She often joked that our wedding reception had been the most effective fundraising event she had ever attended, since several guests had been so moved by the evening's events that they became major donors. My father had filed for divorce immediately after Delilah's arrest. The legal proceedings revealed even more of her deceptions, including forged documents, hidden debts, and evidence that she had been planning her exit strategy for over a year. The insurance fraud charges were particularly serious as investigators discovered she had taken out policies on 3 previous boyfriends before meeting my father. During the divorce proceedings, my father and I began rebuilding our relationship. He had been genuinely horrified to learn about Delilah's treatment of me over the years, admitting that he had chosen to ignore warning signs because he was lonely after my mother's death. We started having weekly dinners, just the 2 of us, slowly reconstructing the bond that Delilah had spent years undermining. I should have protected you, he told me during one of these dinners. I was so afraid of being alone that I let her convince me you were the problem. I am sorry, Serafina. You deserved better from me. his apology meant more than he probably realized. Having my father acknowledge what had happened and take responsibility for his part in it helped heal wounds I had carried for years. Marcus had handled the aftermath of our wedding reception with characteristic grace. He ensured that the vendors were paid, the venue was cleaned, and our guests received thank you notes that acknowledged the unusual circumstances of the evening. Several people commented that it had been the most memorable wedding they had ever attended, though probably not for traditional reasons. The legal consequences for Delilah were severe. The combination of identity theft, insurance fraud, and conspiracy charges resulted in a 7-year federal sentence. Her conviction made local news partly because of the dramatic wedding reception confrontation, but mostly because prosecutors used her case to highlight the serious nature of financial crimes against family members. During her sentencing hearing, Delilah maintained that she was the victim of a wealthy man's revenge plot. She claimed Marcus had orchestrated everything to make her look bad because she had questioned his motives for marrying me. The judge was not impressed by this defense, particularly given the overwhelming evidence of premeditated criminal activity. "Mrs. Morrison," the judge said during sentencing, "your actions represent a profound betrayal of family trust. You systematically deceived your husband, stole his identity, planned to defraud insurance companies, and apparently considered violence as a solution to your financial problems. The fact that these crimes were exposed during a family celebration does not make them less serious." I attended the sentencing hearing not out of vindictiveness, but because I wanted to see justice served. Watching Delilah in orange prison clothing, no longer able to maintain her facade of social superiority, I felt something I had not expected: pity. She had spent so much energy trying to tear down other people that she had destroyed her own life in the process. Marcus and I were building something completely different. Our marriage had started with deception, but not malicious deception. Marcus had hidden his wealth because he wanted to be loved for himself, not his money. I had hidden my vulnerabilities because I was afraid of being judged for my background. But the events at our wedding reception had forced us to be completely honest with each other, and that honesty had strengthened our relationship immeasurably. We had also discovered that we worked well as a team. Marcus brought strategic thinking and resources, while I contributed empathy and understanding of the challenges our foundation clients faced. Together, we were creating something that neither of us could have accomplished alone. The young woman who had felt like an outsider at family gatherings was now surrounded by a chosen family that included Marcus, Jennifer, my father, and the dozens of young people we worked with through the foundation. We hosted monthly dinners at our home, bringing together current scholarship recipients with program alumni who had successfully transitioned to independence. These gatherings reminded me constantly that family is not about blood relationships or social status. Family is about people who choose to support each other, celebrate each other's victories, and provide comfort during difficult times. Delilah had spent years trying to make me feel like I did not belong anywhere, but she had been wrong. I belonged exactly where I chose to be. Standing in my foundation office, watching Marcus work with a group of high school seniors on their college applications, I thought about how much had changed since that terrible reception evening. Delilah had intended to destroy my happiness, but instead, she had inadvertently created the circumstances that allowed Marcus and me to build something beautiful together. So, here's my question for all of you who have followed this incredible journey with me. Have you ever experienced that moment when someone tried to tear you down, but their actions actually revealed your true strength? When family drama forced you to choose between blood loyalty and chosen family? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Because I have learned that these experiences, as painful as they are in the moment, often lead us exactly where we need to be. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories. Share this video with anyone who might need a reminder that justice does exist and that sometimes karma works in the most unexpected ways. thank you for joining me on this wild ride. And remember that your worth is never determined by people who try to make you feel small. Choose your family wisely, stand up for yourself courageously, and never let anyone convince you that you deserve less than complete respect and love.